But what I want to look at, and we promoted earlier when we sent you an invite to this webinar, is what is the history of hyperinflation? Is hyperinflation rare? Is it common? What has been its impact in society over the decades? And first of all, let's define our terms, because most people have never experienced a hyperinflation environment. According to the International Accounting Standards Boards, the definition of hyperinflation is a cumulative inflation rate over 3 years approaching 100%. So if a society is deemed to be in a hyperinflation state, which is a state where the currency is rapidly losing its purchasing power parity relative to a constant basket of goods and services, that would be for 3 consecutive years at a 26% per annum compounding for 3 years in a row. Does that make sense? There was another definition by Kagan in 1956, and he defined hyperinflation state as an inflation state exceeding 50% a month. As a rule of thumb, normal monthly and annual low inflation and deflation are reported per month, while under hyperinflation, the general price levels could rise by 5 to 10% every single day. So this is a vicious cycle that is created by government and central bank fiat currency systems, in which more and more inflation is created with each iteration of an ever-increasing money printing cycle. And remember, it isn't just the physical money printing we're talking about. We're talking about the impact of credit for people to borrow this hyperinflating currency unit, go out and purchase goods and services before it is extinguished in its purchasing power component. So I'm going to take you now on what the hyperinflation looks like in various countries. Now, I don't have time to read all the text. I have provided text here. You can go back and look at the recording of this webinar at FXStreet after my talk, and you can read the text, which gives you some. So I'm going to kind of hit on the highlights of various countries that have gone into hyperinflation states. Argentina had their hyperinflation from 1975 through 1991. In 1975, the highest denomination peso issued was the 1,000 peso. And by the time the inflation was done, in 1981, the highest denomination was 1 million pesos. You can imagine what happened to the purchasing power of that currency. Then let's take a look at the hyperinflation happened in Angola from 1991 through 1995. We saw a massive hyperinflation where the currency unit goes from 1,000 to over 5 million. Massive loss of purchasing power in that era. There was a hyperinflation in Austria in 1922, and then from 1914 through 1922, the consumer price index in Austria was up over 11,836%. In Belarus, there was a hyperinflation from 1994 through 2002. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, they had their worst inflation in 1993, where a dinara goes from 1,000 units to over 100 million units, and then eventually in 1993 to 50 billion dinara notes that were printed. Massive loss of purchasing power. In Bolivia, we had a hyperinflation from 1984 through 1986. Can you imagine being a currency trader in these countries during this period of time? There was a 1,000,000 to 1 replacement of the fiat currency by the Central Bank of Bolivia. A lot of people remember the Brazilian hyperinflation from 1986 through 1984, where the Cruzeiro virtually became worthless, worth about 1 trillion of a U.S. cent, and adjusted for inflation and multiple devaluations, inflation reached 2,075%, and a new currency was actually adopted, replaced the Cruzeiro with the real. And 1 real is the equivalent of, my goodness, 2.75. You read the number of zeros that are behind this. It's absolutely staggering. All of this is created by government, by the way, or the central bank of the country that's attached to the government. Bulgaria, free city of Dazang in 1923, where the 1,000 mark was ultimately replaced by the 10 billion mark. Georgia had a recession in 1994. So you can see many of these recessions and runaway inflations, and you can imagine how devastating it was on the culture. We can look at this in a moment because the people were not prepared. They did not understand how to protect themselves in an environment like this. Let's take a look at the Greek. We've heard a lot about Greece's problems, but their worst inflation, hyperinflation, was in 1944. I'm sorry. In 1942, the highest denomination was 50,000 drachma. One drachma was eventually exchanged for 50 billion drachma. Can you imagine that? You imagine how the credit, the bonds issued by government and or corporations in these countries that were denominated in these countries. This is one that's very near and dear to Online Trading Academy. And I didn't know about this until I started doing research for this webinar. But Israel, the founder of Online Trading Academy is from Israel. His name is A.L. Shahar. And he founded the company in 1997. I joined him in 1998. But one of the reasons Online Trading Academy was formed in 1997 was because of the inflation that Israel had in the 1970s. Their inflation went from 13% up to 111% by 1979, up to 133% by 1980, and then up to 445% in 1984. And the Israeli shekel was literally wiped out in purchasing power. And that had a big impact on the founder of Online Trading Academy because he was devastated. The Israeli economy collapsed, stock market collapsed, his wealth disappeared, and he decided to open up Online Trading Academy to give people financial education so they would never experience this kind of cultural hardship. That's a true story. Serbia had a hyperinflation in 1993. Mexico had a hyperinflation in the 1970s. North Korea had their hyperinflation, been going on from 1947, never really stopped. It's still been going on through 2009. What about Nicaragua? Nicaragua went through their worst inflation rate from 1987 through 1990, and where one Cordoba was reissued with a 50 billion Corolla.